The sun rose slowly over the mountains of Afghanistan. The sky was dusty orange and the air was already warm. Soldiers in the base were checking their gear, loading rifles, and preparing for what they thought would be a normal mission. Among them was Sergeant Natalie Cruz, a 26-year-old combat medic. She stood quietly near the Humvee, adjusting her helmet and checking her medical bag for the third time. Her hands were steady, but inside her heart beat faster than normal. Natalie wasn't new to war anymore. She had already seen men cry, scream, and bleed. She had patched up wounds under fire and held the hands of dying friends. But today felt different. She didn't know why. It was just a strange feeling in her gut, the kind of feeling soldiers sometimes get before something bad happens. Her commander, Captain Hicks, walked over. He was in his 40s, tall, strict, and respected by everyone in the unit. He looked at Natalie and gave her a small nod. "You good, Cruz?" he asked. She nodded back. "Yes, sir." Ready as always. Hicks wasn't a man of many words. He had been through multiple tours, survived ambushes, and led men into deadly zones. Natalie trusted him with her life. She always followed his lead. He made her feel safe, even in the middle of war. The mission was to enter a village known as Kostan. It was marked low risk by intel. Their goal was to check for enemy movement, make contact with locals, and return before sunset. Routine, they said. But as Natalie looked at the narrow roads on the map, something didn't sit right. She didn't speak, though. She was just the medic, not the strategist still. She whispered a quiet prayer under her breath. The convoy rolled out just after 0700 hours. 4 Humvees moved slowly along the rough road. Dust clouds rose behind the wheels. Natalie sat in the second vehicle, watching through the window as small homes and hills passed by. Children waved from far away. Goats walked near the edge of the road. It all looked peaceful, but she knew that in war zones, peace was often just a mask inside the Humvee. One soldier was humming a country song. Another checked his ammo for the 5th time. Natalie pulled out a photo from her vest pocket, her younger sister. Smiling, she kissed it lightly and put it back. This picture gave her strength, reminded her why she had joined the army. Suddenly, the vehicle stopped. The road ahead had narrowed, turning into a tight passage between mud brick houses. Commander Hicks gave the order to move carefully. Everyone sat straighter, hands on weapons, eyes sharp. Natalie felt her throat go dry. As they entered the village, it became quiet, too quiet. No kids, no elders, no movement in the windows. The soldiers exchanged looks. Everyone felt it now. This was not normal. Then it happened. Boom. The first Humvee exploded, sending fire, metal, and dirt flying into the air. The blast shook the ground, and the windshield of Natalie's Humvee cracked like ice. Screams filled the radio, followed by rapid gunfire. "Ambush! Ambush!" someone yelled. Bullets rained down from rooftops. Natalie's training kicked in. She grabbed her med kit, pushed open the door, and ran into the chaos. Commander Hicks was already outside. Barking orders, he was standing near a wall, helping to pull a wounded soldier behind cover. Natalie joined him, sliding on her knees beside the injured man. She checked his pulse, applied a tourniquet, and signaled for morphine. Her hands moved fast, but her mind stayed calm. For now, more shots were fired, louder and closer. Someone screamed "Sniper!" and soldiers ducked. Then Natalie heard a short cry. Hicks had been hit. She turned and saw him on the ground, blood soaking through his leg and chest armor. "No, no, no," she whispered, rushing to him. She dropped beside him. Checking his wound, he was still alive, barely. His eyes opened slightly, and he tried to speak. "Stay with me, sir." "I got you," she said, pressing gauze on his wound. Her voice was shaking, but her hands were steady. As bullets flew around them, something inside Natalie changed. She was no longer just a medic. She was the only one who could save her commander. The mission was no longer about maps or orders, and it was about survival. And Natalie Cruz was not going to let anyone die on her watch. The smoke from the blast was thick, black, and full of heat. Natalie couldn't see more than 5 feet ahead. Her ears were ringing, and her heart pounded like a drum. Screams, gunshots, and chaos blended into one loud nightmare. The convoy had walked into a trap, and a perfect one. The lead Humvee was gone, blown apart into twisted metal and flame. Bodies were lying still, some moving slowly, others not at all. The radio crackled with fear, voices shouting for help, commands overlapping, but no one really knew what to do. From the rooftops, Taliban fighters opened fire. Their shadows moved quickly across the walls above. They had the high ground, the element of surprise, and full control of the village. Bullets rained down like angry bees, snapping past Natalie's head. She grabbed her gear and crouched low beside a broken wall. She looked down at Commander Hicks, who was bleeding fast. His face was pale, lips trembling. A bullet had torn through his lower chest and blood soaked his vest. Natalie pulled out her emergency bandage and pressed it hard on the wound. Hicks groaned in pain but didn't speak. "Stay with me, sir," she said again. Her voice trembling now. She looked around and no one was coming. Her team was pinned down across the road. Behind a burning truck, smoke covered everything, and the air was filled with dust and panic. Natalie tapped her radio. "This is Cruz, I have a critical down." "I repeat, critical down, I need help now." No reply. The signal was dead, probably jammed by the enemy. She looked back at Hicks, who tried to lift his hand. "Natalie," he whispered weakly, "don't let this be it." "I won't," she promised. Even though her hands were shaking, she had to move him. Staying in this spot was a death sentence. She looked at the narrow alley behind her. It offered some cover, but it was far. Still, she had no choice. Natalie gripped his vest, took a deep breath and began to drag him. Every inch was a fight. Hicks was over 200 pounds with gear. Her boots slipped on blood and sand. Bullets hit the wall just inches from her head. But she kept going. Her muscles burned, her back screamed. But she didn't stop. Somewhere behind her, she heard a soldier cry out. The enemy was moving closer, tightening the trap. Still no backup, still no help. Natalie finally reached the alley, dragging Hicks behind a broken cart. She laid him flat, opened his vest, and started treating the wounds. Her fingers moved fast, plugging, tying, pressing, injecting everything she had learned in training. But she could see the fear in Hicks's eyes. He knew he might not make it. Then she noticed his M4 rifle lying beside him. It had fallen during the drag, covered in dust but still loaded. Natalie stared at it for a second. She had handled weapons before, but she wasn't trained to use them in battle. She was a medic, not a soldier who shoots. But now she was alone and someone had to fight back. She picked up the M4, checked the safety, and looked down the alley. Enemy boots were moving just beyond the corner. They were coming, then fast and armed. Natalie pressed her back to the wall. Breathing hard, her hands were sweating, heart pounding. She could feel every beat like thunder inside her chest. Suddenly a head popped out from the side. Enemy fighter. She didn't even think, just pulled the trigger. Pop, 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 the man dropped. And her hands trembled, but she didn't freeze. She moved to a better position and fired again. Another shadow fell. Natalie Cruz had just taken her first life, and something in her had changed. She wasn't proud, she wasn't afraid. She was simply focused, and because if she failed now, Hicks would die and maybe everyone else too. She picked up the radio again, even though she knew it was useless. "This is Cruz, enemy inside the village. Hicks is down, I'm alone. Requesting backup." No reply, only static. She crawled over to Hicks and squeezed his hand. "I got you, sir, I promise," she said. His lips moved, but no sound came out. His eyes were half closed. Natalie knew she couldn't sit here and wait anymore. She had to clear a path, had to do the unthinkable, leave him just for a few minutes, to push back the enemy and give her team a chance to reach them. She kissed her commander's forehead, picked up the rifle again, and this time her grip was solid. She wasn't just a medic anymore, she was a fighter, a protector, a woman with a mission. The ambush had begun. But Natalie Cruz was just getting started. Natalie's knees were scraped, her uniform torn, and her face covered in sweat and dust. But her eyes stayed locked on the rifle in her hands. It still felt strange, like it didn't belong to her. Yet it was the only thing keeping her and Commander Hicks alive. She checked the ammo, one full magazine. She glanced at Hicks, who was barely conscious. His breathing was rough, shallow, and fast. Blood still oozed from the wound near his ribs, even after everything she had done. He needed a medevac, he needed surgery. But there was nothing. No choppers, no voices, no help, only silence broken by gunfire in the distance. Natalie tapped her radio again. "This is Sergeant Cruz, medical emergency. Requesting urgent evacuation. Repeat, urgent evacuation." Only static replied. She switched channels, tried again, still nothing. Her heart sank. She looked at the sky, empty. No helicopters, no drones, no air support. The other squads were likely stuck too, pinned down like her. She was completely alone, and reality hit hard. No one was coming. Natalie leaned against the wall and breathed slowly. Her arms ached from dragging Hicks, her legs felt like lead. But she didn't let herself panic. She closed her eyes for 5 seconds, just 5, and remembered the training words from boot camp. You are the calm in chaos. She opened her eyes again, focused, determined, awake. She had 2 options, wait and pray or move and fight. And Natalie Cruz had never been the waiting type. She unzipped a small pouch on Hicks's vest and found extra ammo. She loaded it carefully, hands no longer trembling. She had already taken down 2 enemies, now she had to do more. Not for glory, not for medals, but for survival. She crouched low and peeked around the corner. The narrow street ahead was filled with broken crates, barrels, and shadows. She saw movement. Someone ducked behind a doorframe. Natalie raised her M4 and waited. When the fighter leaned out, she fired 3 sharp rounds. He dropped instantly. She didn't wait. She ran across the street and slid behind a stack of tires. 2 more fighters turned in surprise. She squeezed the trigger again. Pop, pop. One went down, the other ran back into a house. Natalie stayed low, breathing hard. She knew this part of the village was crawling with enemies. But she also knew that if she could push them back just a little, just enough, her team could reach Hicks. She started clearing house by house, room by room, corner by corner. Each time her boots kicked open a door, her heart skipped a beat. Each time she stepped over broken glass and ruined furniture, her finger was ready on the trigger. One fighter jumped out with a knife. She dodged, shot him twice in the chest. She didn't stop to think about it. Not now, not yet. Then, inside the 4th building, she found something that froze her. A radio, enemy frequency, still working. She quickly switched to her team's channel and tried again. Echo team, this is Cruz. I'm inside Sector B. Enemy cleared. Commander Hicks is critical. Do you copy? For a moment, silence, then finally a voice. Cruz? Is that you? We thought you were gone, she almost cried. This area's clear. I need medevac support and a stretcher now, she said. Voice firm but shaking. We're 2 blocks away. Hang tight. The reply came. She closed her eyes and whispered, Thank you. She rushed back to the alley. Hicks was still breathing, but barely. His skin had turned pale gray, lips dry and cracked. Natalie dropped to her knees beside him and checked his pulse. We've got help coming, sir, you hear me? You're not dying today, she said. His fingers moved slightly, just enough to let her know he heard. She held his hand tightly, rifle still slung across her shoulder. She looked around the alley, guarding it like a lioness protecting her cub. Every crack in the wall, every shifting shadow, she watched it all. Her ears were sharp now, trained, tuned into every sound. No one was going to get past her. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then she heard it. Boots. A dozen soldiers turned the corner, faces wide with shock. They saw her, blood-stained, rifle ready, guarding the downed commander like a one-woman army. One of them muttered, Holy hell, another whispered. She held this entire street alone. The medics rushed in, taking over Hicks's care, but they all looked at Natalie with quiet awe. She didn't smile, didn't speak. She just stood up slowly and handed the M4 back to its original owner. I just borrowed it, she said quietly. And for the first time since the ambush began, Natalie Cruz let herself breathe. The dust had not yet settled. Smoke still rose from burning tires and broken walls. But for Natalie Cruz, time stood still. She stared at the spot where Commander Hicks had just been lifted onto the stretcher. Now he was gone, taken toward the evac zone. And she was standing alone in the middle of an alley that had tasted blood. Her hands were still wrapped around the M4, even though the medics had said, You can give it back now, but she didn't. Not yet, because in her heart she knew the mission wasn't over. As her teammates moved through the area, sweeping for hidden threats, Natalie noticed something they didn't. She spotted footprints in the dust, small, fast-moving, leading toward the village mosque. And she remembered something she had heard during the briefing. A possible weapons cache hidden near a civilian structure. But no one had confirmed it, and it had been marked low priority. Natalie's mind raced. What if the attack was only part of a bigger plan? What if the enemy had hidden something worse? Something meant to hurt even more soldiers? She couldn't just walk away. Not while that doubt burned in her chest. A soldier beside her said, Cruz, evac birds here, you coming? She looked at him, then back at the mosque in the distance. I'll catch up, she said calmly. You sure? He asked, frowning. Yeah, she nodded, gripping the M4 tighter. Just need to check something first. She didn't wait for a reply. She turned and jogged toward the mosque. Moving low and silent, every step she took was a decision. Every breath was a promise. She wasn't chasing glory. She was chasing peace of mind. As she neared the old building, she slowed down. The air felt heavier here. Birds weren't chirping, wind wasn't blowing. Even the dogs that usually barked from rooftops were gone. That's when she knew someone was inside. She crouched near a broken window and peered in. 3 men armed were inside, crouching over crates. They weren't praying. They were loading RPGs and rifles. Natalie's throat tightened. She had been right. This was a second wave waiting to happen. Her finger hovered near the trigger. But something made her pause. She was one person. With no backup and no comms, should she risk it? She thought of Hicks lying pale on that stretcher. She thought of the young soldiers who might walk into this trap. And then her heart answered for her, and yes. She moved to the side door, took cover behind a barrel. She aimed through the small gap and fired. The first man dropped with a shout. The others scrambled, grabbing weapons, yelling in a language she didn't understand. She fired again, hitting one in the leg. He crawled behind cover. Returning fire blindly, Natalie ducked low, bullets snapping above her head. She knew the layout of buildings like this. Small prayer hall, narrow back room, one exit. She circled the mosque quickly, surprising them from the side window. They weren't ready. She fired short, controlled bursts, her training mixed with instinct. Both men went down. She waited for a full minute, finger tight on the trigger. Nothing moved, no sound, just the pounding of her heart in her ears. She stepped inside slowly, careful with every step. The room was full of crates, explosives, wires, maps. It was a full attack plan, maybe for later that week. She had just stopped something much bigger than anyone knew. She grabbed one of the maps and stuffed it in her vest. Then she heard it. Footsteps behind her. She spun, rifle up. It was her team finally catching up. "Cruz?" a soldier said, stunned. "You came here alone?" She nodded. "You took down a weapons cell by yourself?" She looked at the bodies, then back at them. "I had to be sure," she whispered. Her squad leader stared at her, then gave a slow, respectful nod. "You made the right call," he said. But Natalie didn't smile. Her eyes were still scanning the corners, still listening for danger. Because once you step beyond the role you were trained for, once you make the decision to fight, there's no going back. She handed the rifle back finally. But her heart still held its weight. It wasn't just a weapon anymore. It was a symbol of what she had become. A medic, yes, but also a soldier, a protector, and today, she had made her decision. To do more than save lives, to stop what could take them. The wind picked up as Natalie Cruz stood outside the mosque. Dust swirled at her boots, mixing with blood, ash, and the broken silence of battle. Her heart was still racing, but her hands had stopped shaking. She looked down at the map she had pulled from the crate. It was hand-drawn with lines pointing to roads, schools and checkpoints. It wasn't just a plan. It was a warning, a glimpse into what the enemy had been preparing next. Her squad leader stared at her, still shocked. "You really cleared this place by yourself?" She nodded, her voice quiet. They were going to hit another convoy. Maybe worse. No one said anything for a moment, then he added, "You're something else, Cruz." But Natalie didn't respond. Praise didn't matter right now. She kept looking over the rooftops, the roads beyond, the shadows that stretched longer as the sun dipped lower. Something inside her had changed, and there was no way to go back. As the team prepared to fall back to the safe zone, orders came in. Another group of soldiers had gone missing 2 blocks north. They were last seen heading into a narrow alley behind the village well. Comms had dropped again. No gunfire, no movement, just silence. Natalie looked at her commander. "We can't leave them," she said. He hesitated. "We've got wounded and no clear path. We wait for backup." But Natalie shook her head. They might not have that kind of time. She looked at the team, tired, bruised, mentally drained. They had been through hell already, and yet she turned away and began to move toward the alley. "Cruz, you're not ordered to go," her team leader called. "I know," she answered without turning back, and then she disappeared into the next street. Alone again, but not afraid this time. Every step felt heavier. The sound of her boots echoed against empty buildings. Her rifle was loaded, held close to her chest. Her breaths were slow, counting each one like it could be her last. As she moved deeper into the alley, she spotted signs of struggle. A blood trail, broken glass, a torn piece of uniform stuck to a door. She followed it carefully, no sound, no shouting, just the eerie stillness of something unfinished. She reached a closed gate and pushed it open slowly. Inside, she found them. 3 soldiers huddled in a corner. Guns down, eyes wide. One of them had been shot in the leg. The other 2 were out of ammo. "We thought no one was coming," one whispered, tears in his eyes. "Well, someone did," Natalie said softly. She moved quickly, checking the wound, wrapping it tight. The injured soldier flinched but nodded. "You're the medic who fought back, right?" he asked. Natalie didn't reply. She just checked his pulse and loaded one of their empty rifles with a mag from her belt. "We're moving out," she said. "You lead," one of them replied without hesitation. They moved slowly through a side path Natalie had seen earlier. She kept them low, hidden behind broken carts and alley shadows. Her ears stayed sharp. Any click, crack, or whisper would mean danger. But she trusted herself now more than ever. Not because she felt brave, but because she couldn't afford to be anything else. Suddenly, a movement. Someone stepped out from behind a wall with a weapon raised. Natalie didn't wait. She fired 2 quick shots. The enemy dropped. She moved in and checked for others. Nothing. The soldiers behind her stared in awe. "You're not just a medic," one said. "No," she answered quietly. "Not today." When they finally reached the checkpoint, the rest of the squad met them with disbelief and relief. The injured soldier was lifted to safety. The others were given water, their hands still shaking. Natalie walked past them all, rifle still slung over her back. She didn't need applause or attention. She just needed to know they were alive. That was enough. Later that night, sitting alone near the edge of the camp, Natalie stared up at the stars. The village behind her was quiet now, but inside her the noise still echoed. She thought of Hicks, still fighting to breathe in a field hospital. She thought of the men she had shot. She thought of how alone she had felt, but never once had fear frozen her. She had faced death and walked through it, not untouched, but unbroken, alone, yes, but not afraid. Because Natalie Cruz had learned something in that village. Being afraid doesn't mean weakness, acting in spite of fear. That's where courage lives. And tonight, under the quiet stars, she knew one thing for certain. She was never going to be the same again. The first sound was low, like a distant growl in the sky. Natalie Cruz opened her eyes and looked up. The night was dark, with only a sliver of moon. But she heard it clearly now. Helicopter blades. Faint at first, but getting louder, heavier, more real. She stood from the crate she had been sitting on and reached for her rifle. She wasn't sure if it was friend or enemy at first, but the rhythm of the sound was familiar. She had memorized it during every supply drop and medevac. It was the sound of hope. She moved to the edge of the rooftop where she had taken watch. Below her, the camp buzzed to life, soldiers lifting radios, checking flares. "Is it finally back up?" someone whispered. Another voice said, "God, please let it be them." The radio on Natalie's vest crackled. "This is Eagle 1 approaching North Ridge. Permission to land." She pressed the button quickly. "Eagle 1, this is Sergeant Cruz. We see you." "Landing zone is clear. Welcome." The sound grew louder. 2 Black Hawk helicopters sliced through the sky, flying low and fast. They hovered above the ridge for a moment before descending. Dust exploded from the ground as the birds touched down. Out stepped a new unit, fresh soldiers in clean uniforms. Eyes sharp, bodies quick. Behind them rolled medical teams, supply crates, and a mobile command post. Natalie watched silently as chaos turned into order. Wounded were lifted into stretchers, ammo was handed out. Engineers started checking destroyed vehicles. It felt like the war was slowly shifting, if only a little. One officer approached her, tall, strong, with silver hair and a calm voice. "Are you Sergeant Cruz?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "You're the medic who held this sector," he said. More a statement than a question. Natalie didn't respond. He looked her in the eyes. "We've read the reports. Your action saved lives and changed outcomes." She looked away. "I just did what I had to do," she replied quietly. The officer nodded with respect. "Well, now it's our turn and you get some rest." But Natalie didn't rest. Not yet. There were still reports to make, maps to update, and one more thing she needed to do. Check on Commander Hicks. She walked to the mobile medic tent. Inside, the smell of antiseptic mixed with the low hum of machines. She found Hicks on a cot near the back. His leg was bandaged, his chest wired with monitors, but he was alive. He opened his eyes when he saw her. His voice was weak but steady. "You still breathing, Cruz?" She smiled for the first time in days. "Barely," she replied. But yeah, he tried to sit up, winced, and gave up. They told me what you did, he said. I didn't do it for medals, she whispered. I know, he nodded. You did it because you're a damn good soldier. She sat beside him. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. The beeping of machines filled the silence. But it wasn't an empty silence, it was peace. The kind that comes after a storm outside. The village was slowly returning to calm. Some civilians were coming back. Kids peeked from doorways, unsure but curious. Soldiers offered bottled water, food packets, and handshakes. The enemy had vanished into the hills, and for now. But the battle wasn't truly over. Natalie returned to her squad. The new reinforcements had set up perimeter lights and satellite feeds. Drones now hovered above, scanning the roads. Everything felt safer, stronger, and more connected. But deep inside, she felt something different. Something new, not fear, not pride. Something heavier, responsibility. She had stepped beyond her role. She had fought with her hands, her heart, and her instincts. Now others were watching her, not just as a medic, but as a leader. A young soldier approached her. Barely 20, Sergeant Cruz? He asked nervously. She looked up. I was told to report to you for patrol guidance. Natalie stood tall, rifle on her back, dust on her boots, and something in her eyes. Calm, fierce, unshaken. She gave him a small nod. Let's walk the north perimeter, she said. We'll start with the blind spots, and just like that, she stepped forward into the role she had earned with blood, courage, and silence. The reinforcements had arrived. But Natalie Cruz was already the strongest force on that ground. The days after the ambush moved slowly. For the world, the war kept spinning forward. But for Natalie Cruz, everything had paused. Every sound, every face, every step still carried the weight of that day. She had saved lives, yes, she had pushed through fear, bled courage, and held ground alone. But none of that mattered as much as the man who had fallen beside her. Commander Hicks, her mentor, her leader, and the reason she had become more than just a medic. Now she stood outside the military hospital. Her boots were clean, her uniform was pressed, but her heart was heavy. She had not seen Hicks since the night they evacuated him. She had been too busy fighting, and maybe a little scared to face the truth. She stepped into the recovery wing. It was quiet, filled with machines, soft voices, and wounded heroes. Each room held a story, some with happy endings, some still waiting. The nurse at the desk looked up. You're Sergeant Cruz? Natalie nodded. He's been asking for you every day, the nurse said with a smile. Natalie's throat tightened. He's in room 12. She walked down the hallway slowly. Each step brought back flashes, smoke, blood. The sound of his voice whispering her name. When she reached the door, she paused. She took a deep breath and knocked lightly. Come in, a voice called. She pushed the door open. There he was. Commander Hicks, pale, stitched, one leg raised in a cast but alive. He turned his head and saw her. And for the first time in a long while, he smiled. Took you long enough, he said. Natalie let out a shaky laugh and stepped inside. I didn't want to show up empty-handed, she joked. Holding a small box, he raised an eyebrow. What's that? She opened the box slowly, revealing his dog tags and the piece of the map she had recovered from the enemy's hideout. They almost got lost, sir, she said, but I figured you'd want them back. Hicks stared at the items, his eyes moist. You carried those through the fight? I carried you first, she said softly. For a moment, silence filled the room again, but it wasn't awkward. It was full of gratitude, respect, and something unspoken. Everyone's talking about you, Hicks said, breaking the quiet. Medics from other units are calling you the one-woman wall. Natalie chuckled. I prefer just Natalie, if that's all right. He nodded. You didn't just do your job, he said. Voice slow but strong. You made hard choices. You acted without orders, and you did what even trained combat leaders might not have done. Natalie looked down, her fingers tightening on the chair's edge. I was scared, she admitted. Good, Hicks said without hesitation. That means your heart's still human. She looked up at him. Did I do the right thing, sir? He met her gaze with eyes full of pride. You did what had to be done, he said. And you did it with courage, skill, and a hell of a lot of heart. Natalie felt something release inside her, like a weight she didn't know she was carrying. For days she had questioned everything. Every shot she fired, every second she hesitated, every decision she made. But now, hearing it from the man she admired most, it meant everything. I'm being transferred back to the States for full recovery, Hicks added. Doctor says I'll walk again, but no more field duty. Natalie nodded, her smile bittersweet. You deserve the rest, she said. He looked at her seriously. But the unit needs a new field commander. Her eyes widened. No way. I already recommended you, Hicks said calmly. You've earned it, Cruz. Natalie's heart skipped. Me? A field commander? She had never seen herself that way. She was the helper, the healer, the background strength, but after everything, maybe she was more now. Not because she wanted power, but because she had proven she could protect, decide, and lead. She swallowed hard. If I say yes, I'm not sure I'll be perfect. Hicks smiled again. No one is, he said. But the good ones never pretend to be. She stood up and saluted. This time not just out of habit, but from the deepest place in her chest he saluted back, slower, proud. I'll make sure your boots don't get dusty while you're gone, she said. He laughed. I'll hold you to that. As she walked out of the room, the hallway felt different. She wasn't just a medic anymore. She was something more, something stronger, something earned. And as her boots echoed down the hall, Natalie Cruz didn't just carry gear or memories anymore. She carried a future. The sun rose quietly over the desert base. The wind was gentle that morning, carrying the soft smell of dust and fuel. Somewhere, a radio played a low song, a country tune about going home. But Natalie Cruz wasn't thinking about home. She stood alone near the edge of the training yard, wearing fresh uniform stripes on her shoulder, Field Commander, 2 words she never expected to follow her name. Soldiers passed by and nodded with respect. Some smiled, others saluted, a few even whispered, That's her. The one who dragged Hicks, the medic who finished the mission. Natalie didn't respond. She still wasn't used to being looked at that way, but deep inside something had changed. She no longer felt like she had to prove anything, because now she understood. She had become more than a medic. Later that morning, she walked into the operations tent. Maps covered the table, radios buzzed with updates. Young soldiers stood straight when she entered. She gave a nod and pointed to the terrain chart. We'll send 2 patrols through the west route today, she said. Clear the area near the old canal and double-check the power station. Her voice was calm, steady, the kind of voice that others trusted. She had learned that leadership wasn't about shouting or giving orders. It was about listening, watching, stepping in at the right moment. It was about walking through fire and still standing tall when the smoke cleared. As her team moved out, she stayed behind to check on supplies. At the edge of the base, a group of children watched the soldiers from behind a fence. One small girl waved. Natalie waved back. The girl's smile reminded her of her own younger sister, the photo she carried in her vest that day during the ambush. It reminded her why she kept going that afternoon. A call came in. A soldier injured during a training exercise. Natalie didn't hesitate. She grabbed her bag and ran across the compound, old habit strong and ready. When she reached the scene, the young private was sitting up, arm twisted in pain. Don't worry, she said, kneeling beside him. I've done this before, a lot. She popped the shoulder back into place with one quick move. The soldier groaned, then smiled. Thank you, ma'am, he said. Call me Cruz, she replied with a grin. Later that evening, Natalie sat outside her tent. She looked up at the sky. It was wide and endless, painted in orange and purple. A warm cup of coffee rested in her hands nearby. The wind moved gently through the flags on the base fence. Everything was quiet, but her heart wasn't. It whispered memories, gunfire, blood, the weight of Hicks in her arms. It whispered voices, the wounded men she pulled from the alley. The fear in their eyes, it whispered truth. She had changed, and she could never go back to who she was before. She reached into her vest pocket and pulled out Hicks's old dog tags. He had insisted she keep them. For luck, he said. But to her, they were something more. They were a reminder that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about doing the right thing, even when fear is crawling all over your skin. The next day, she stood before a group of new recruits. Her mission, to train them, guide them, prepare them. She looked at their young faces, full of nerves and hope, and she said only one thing. Being a soldier isn't about carrying a weapon. It's about carrying each other. They listened, silent and wide-eyed, because when Natalie Cruz spoke, it wasn't just words, it was experience, it was pain. It was truth carved into her bones as the weeks passed. She became more than just a name in reports. She became a legend on the base, not because of medals or stories, but because of how she treated people, how she led from the front and stayed behind to help the last man. She never asked to be a hero, but when people told her she was, she didn't argue anymore. She just smiled and said, "I was just doing what needed to be done." And every time she walked past the memorial wall, names of the fallen etched in stone, she whispered a small promise. "I won't let your sacrifice be forgotten," because the day she dragged her commander through fire, the day she picked up his M4 and faced death alone, the day she refused to leave anyone behind, that was the day Natalie Cruz became more than a medic. She became a leader, a protector, a name that would never be forgotten.